Well, times have changed, places and teams just doing what they have to do to make things right. But the fact of the matter is that some football teams just like the limelight and like to be known for one great era, and it seems to be one great era, and then the rest of your body of work is not really that great. I mean, Buffalo Bills fans before the renaissance of the 2020s would always be remembered for their 1990s stuff. The Colts would always be remembered for their late 60s, early 70s shenanigans before Peyton Manning took over them. But what if I told you that there's a recent Super Bowl winning franchise that actually has their recent Super Bowl be basically passed over for another era in which they won a Super Bowl and all that? Today we're going to be talking about the 2003 St. Louis Rams. So get ready. I said, are you ready? Are you ready for some Cutter What If NFL football? A weekend invasion! Yeah, it's Cutter talking to you live. We got the hits and the misses. So come join me for all the fun. All the rowdy fans come in. It's the weekend, y'all. Are you ready? Yeah, let's do this, baby. Yes. So the St. Louis Rams, well, we're saying them as the St. Louis Rams. I couldn't really find a collapse of the LA Rams and all that for what if. So I decided to go with just the Rams franchise in general. They were founded in 1945 to be an NFL team called the Cleveland Rams. But you didn't know that. But then a year later, they decided to sell the team to Los Angeles so Tinseltown could have an NFL team. In fact, the West Coast of the U.S. would have an NFL team before a baseball team, before a basketball team, and before a hockey team. So they were the originators. Cleveland would bounce back with the Browns in the NFL in 1950. The fact of the matter was that the Rams franchise was a pretty good franchise. If UCLA legend Bob Waterfield at pivot or quarterback, if you will, they were looking good. And then Norm Van Brocklin was also picked up by the Rams, and there was a massive quarterback controversy between Van Brocklin and Waterfield. The Rams integrated first. They were the first team to use black players in the NFL. The Rams were decent and all that, but they would get playoff failures in the 60s and 70s that failed to get them to the Super Bowl. Minnesota practically stood in their way for all these years. Simply put, the Vikings were just the Rams' bitch and all that. Or the Rams were the Vikings' bitch, if you will. Nevertheless, the Rams looked pretty good and all that. They did get to the Super Bowl in 1980, which was great. It was just down the road in Pasadena. Unfortunately, Super Bowl 14 would be the Bradshaw and Swan show, and the Bradshaw Stalwart show was. The Steelers would win 31-19 to win the Super Bowl, and the Rams would sink back to mediocrity. One good draft pick later, when they got Eric Dickerson from SMU, the Rams were back in business. Unfortunately, though, they and Dieter Brock, who was brought over from the CFL, could not help the Rams go to the Super Bowl as they ended up falling in the NFC title game in 1986 to those pesky Chicago Bears. Bear down, Chicago Bears. In 1989, the Rams went back to the Super Bowl Final Four, but lost the conference final to San Francisco. The Rams would fall flat. Of course, Jim Everett would play pivot for them and become Chris Everett by Jim Rome. The Rams were floundering. Well, they moved from the LA Coliseum to Anaheim Stadium, because Anaheim is still part of Los Angeles. However, they needed a new stadium, they needed a new look and all that. And Georgia Frontier who got the team from Carol Rosenblum, who drowned off the coast of the Atlantic Ocean in 1979, moved her team to the Midwest, to St. Louis, who had a stadium, the Trans World Dome, ready to be built for an NFL team. So that's what they did. They packed up from LA to St. Louis. Not many people cried when that happened. So the Rams were in St. Louis and they drafted smart. They got Isaac Bruce, as Hakeem, even Ricky Prohl, and Torrey Holt. The Rams were a pivot away from making things happen. Trent Green was brought in 1999 to bring the Rams into prominence. Unfortunately for him, he just had to get hurt at the worst possible time. And this backup by the name of Kurt Warner, who was just a Arena League player who played in NFL Europe and even was a nighttime grocery clerk at Hy-Vee, was there at pivot. And what would he do? Well, he made one of the most magical MVP seasons in ever. Disney made a movie of it, obviously. But the fact of the matter was that, magic is magic. And the Rams magically won the World Championship over the Tennessee Titans, who were just 1 yard short. The Rams had something going. They called themselves the greatest show on turf with Kurt Warner at quarterback, Marshall Faulk at running back, and Holt, Hakeem, and Bruce being the wide receivers. They got to the Super Bowl in 2002 to take on the New England Patriots, a team they beat in the regular season. But somehow, in some way, the Patriots ended up winning that game with a last-minute field goal by Adam Vinatieri after people like John Madden criticized the Patriots for trying to go for it, saying that you should take your chances in overtime. But Brady led the team down the field, kicked the winning field goal, game over. The Rams would lose. So, of course, we'll talk about the 2003 Rams shortly. But the Rams disintegrated once Warner left for the Giants and Arizona. They tried to put their proof in Mark Bulger, not really the best move in the world. They tried other quarterbacks like Sam Bradford, but to no success. The Rams were floundering off the field with attendance being bad and all that. So the Rams owners decided to move the team from St. Louis back to Los Angeles, as LA would finally get some football in after suffering for years without football in the city of Los Angeles. The Rams were going to move to LA and the Chargers were going to move to LA. So the Rams went back to LA. They played at the LA Coliseum for a while, sharing with USC until their new stadium, SoFi Stadium, would be built for the Rams and the Chargers. So the Rams then picked up ground, and then Matthew Stafford, in a massive trade, the Lions traded him to the Rams for Jared Goff. That massive trade bit Detroit in the butt, as Stafford was known as Detroit's best quarterback since Bobby Lane, led his team to the 2022 title against the Bengals. And the Rams have been decent since. Stafford's been well documented, but the fact is, will they win another title? We don't know. But anyway, let's talk about the 2003 Rams. So the 2003 Rams, this was their 66th season in the NFL and their 9th season in St. Louis, and the 400 Mike Martz, who took over for the retiring Dick Vermeil once he won the title. Kurt Warner was demoted to backup quarterback in the 2002 season, and Mark Bulger looked pretty good and all that. However, the Rams would put up 12 wins and win the NFC West, coming out of freaking nowhere. It would be last division titles until 2017. The Rams actually lost a playoff game at home, the franchise, for the first time in 19 years, which was unusual. And it was the last time the Rams would have a winning season as a franchise till 2017. They did make the playoffs at 8-8, but you couldn't do much. Anyway. So anyway, Mark Bulger would be the quarterback of the future, if you will. And do quite well. All that. So yeah, Mark Bulger was the quarterback and would play in the Pro Bowl. Kurt Warner was released after the season to clear up cap space, and Bulger would spend the next 6 years as the quarterback. So Kurt Warner had just been replaced. The Rams would lose Ricky Prohl to the Panthers and James Hodgins to the Cardinals. Dre Bly went to Detroit. They picked up Kyle Turley from the Saints in the trade, offensive tackle. In the draft, they took Pisa Tino Samoa from Hawaii. And Scott Shale was just a commissary pick. Anyway, Warner would have to back up Mark Bulger. Marshall Falk was the running back. Everyone knew that. Isaac Bruce, Kevin Curtis, Torrey Holt, and Dane Looker. Dane Looker were the wide receivers. Cam Cleveland and Brandon Manaloma, the tight ends. Andy King, Andy McCollum, Orlando Pace, John Sinclair, Adam Timmerman, Kyle Turley, Dave Warrable, a great offensive line, defensive lineman, Eric Flowers, Taylor Jackson, Leonard Little, Ryan Pickett, and Grant Westrom, linebackers, Tommy Pulley, Pisa Tinmasoa, defensive backs of note, Adam Archuleta, Jermaine Butler, Rich Cody, Jason Sehorn was a Ram at that year, Arenas Williams, former Cardinal icon, and then Kim Herring, when he was on IR. Sean Landetta was the punter, Jeff Wilkins the kicker. In the regular season, they did lose two of the first three games, well, to the Giants and Seahawks. They ended up losing to the Niners and then to Detroit. But all four games were on the road, so they were a pretty good home team in the Dome. So, anyway, that's what happened. So, anyway, the Rams defeated the Lions to secure the top seed. Well, they wanted to. Unfortunately, though, they fumbled, and the Eagles were the 1 seed. So the Rams would be the 2 seed. Seattle won 10 games to be the 5 seed. So the Rams had the bye and then would take on the Carolina Panthers. And it looked like they were going to win because, Carolina just didn't seem themselves, and the Rams knew what they were doing on home turf, 8-0. Unfortunately, though, they would fall in double overtime to Steve Smith and his big catch for 69 yards. Carolina would use the momentum to go to Philly, beat the Eagles, and then would face the Patriots in the Super Bowl and lose to them. Anyhow, let's take a look at what if the 2003 Rams did not choke this match away. So, anyhow, what if the 2003 Rams had beaten Carolina at home? They would have faced the Eagles. Of course, we leave the other matchups alone, in a sense. So the Eagles would have won their game, and then the Rams would have had to face the Eagles. Both were 12-4, but the Eagles had that tiebreaker based on conference. So the Eagles would host the Rams. Let's play. And that's your score. Nothing in the first quarter. Okay, look. Second quarter, Wilkins kicks the field goal to make it 3-0. And then on a 9-play, 68-yard drive, Philly went down the field, and Westbrook got the touchdown to make it 7-3. Wilkins kicks the field goal to make it 7-6. And then with just under a minute left, the Eagles got a nice play there. And McNabb throws a pass to Deuce Staley in the end zone to make it 14-6. In the third quarter, Wilkins kicks another field goal, 14-9. They just couldn't do it. But then the next possession, after Buckhalter did his job, running the ball, McNabb to Pinkston, touchdown Eagles. They go for the extra point to make it 21-9. The Rams finally scored touchdowns. Joey Goodspeed ran the ball through the middle, 21-16. The fourth quarter saw Philly punt, and then the Rams another field goal, make it 21-19. Bulger gets picked up by Troy Vincent. Rams punt. Philly fumbles the ball. Westbrook fumbles it. Rams at their own 42. Unfortunately, though, they couldn't do anything about it. Philly kind of ran the clock down to a minute 13. They did have a chance as Bulger tried to pass a touchdown to Bruce and Holt in the end zone. Do something for a field goal, but couldn't do it. Brucey. Hey, Brucey. And the Eagles win 21-19 to ruin the Rams' chances to make the Super Bowl. We'll just say the Patriots won the Super Bowl. So, anyway. A lot of people talking about stuff on the Kitchener Rangers as we are taping this. So the Eagles got 3 touchdowns. The Rams only got 1 touchdown and 4 field goals. Donovan McNabb to start. Efficiency, they were 6 for 18, and the Eagles were 8 for 16. Rushing yards, Philly had it 194, 125. And passing yards, 207, 82. Philly couldn't pass the ball. Weirdly, McNabb 8 for 20, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns. Can you believe it? Bulger 19 for 39, 215. Well, Buckhalter ran the ball 119. Falk ran for 114. The only interception was Troy Vincent. Wilkins kicked 4 field goals. That was all she wrote. And the St. Louis Rams would not have made it to the Super Bowl and try to reclaim their throne as greatest show on turf. Just would not have happened. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond to do.